Hey, I'm Justin Hewitson. Currently, I'm an associate professor at the Institute of Philosophy of Mind and Cognition. My background is in comparative literature and philosophy. I think it's fair to say that I'm somewhat cross-disciplinary because I publish in both comparative literature and philosophy. My PhD at National Taiwan University, titled Sarkar's Tantra, a comparative and historical review of transcendental practice, should give you some idea of what informs my current research. Essentially, I take the Indian meditative traditions, in particular Tantra Yoga and Buddhism, and compare them with classical and contemporary Western philosophy. For example, I've considered potential connections concerning the meditative analysis of the self and ontology as they are described in ancient Shiva Tantra, pre-Socratic and Socratic philosophy. I'm also really interested in understanding how ancient contemplative traditions can inform continental approaches, such as phenomenology and existentialism. In a nutshell, a lot of my research covers East-West philosophy. So if this sort of thing interests you, you probably want to come and talk to me. I should point out that unlike many of my colleagues, I am not trained in the philosophy of logic, but I have some general ideas about what this entails. If we are to categorize the type of philosophical research I do, I think it's pretty reasonable to say that I work in what philosophers call the continental tradition. My first publication in the Journal of Comparative and Continental Philosophy compared P.R. Sarkar's tantric methodology to what Edmund Husserl termed the transcendental reduction. I set Tantra against phenomenology to argue how the latter could more effectively achieve its goal of a phenomenological reduction in deconstructing consciousness. I also dealt with the nature of suffering and spiritual ethics in another literary publication. Another of my papers examined the American transcendentalist Ralph Waldo Emerson's first contact with India and religious descent. A subsequent book chapter examined the evolution of consciousness and our understanding of happiness in terms of pragmatism and Tantra. I then published an article examining the ancient sources of Indian spirituality. Finally, my latest publication is a new translation from Sanskrit into English of India's most ancient text, the Rig Veda. I interpreted the Rig Veda's creation hymn from the perspective of Tantric ontology. At present, I'm working on another project titled An Ethics of Nothingness, where I examine the ontological basis of Jean-Paul Sartre's argument for radical human responsibility, and a similar position put forward by the Indian philosopher P.R. Sarkar in terms of Tantric ontology. If anything, I hope this overview points out that I am really interested in comparing ancient and classical philosophical approaches to ontology, consciousness, and ethics with contemporary continental philosophy. I generally focus on how different contemplative and spiritual traditions create meditative praxis that enable us to practically examine consciousness and ultimate reality, and then to derive rational philosophical positions from these perspectives. I'm highly familiar with India's spiritual traditions and enjoy examining the differences between, say, Buddhism and the Vedic or yogic traditions. I also speak Chinese, 我会讲中文, and intend to consider Taoist connections with Tantra in the future. I'll say a few more things. As you probably know by now, our institute is focused on the philosophy of logic and mind. I'm not a trained logician, and I'm obviously open to considering speculative arguments. However, like any good philosopher, I value rational and logical argumentation supported by detailed research. If any of my research matches your interest, feel free to reach out to me and we can chat. Hopefully, I'll see you soon. Take care.